You ain't gotta ask no longer. That there, hey, everywhere we go, everywhere.
Welcome to the Audi Garage. In these weekly videos, I take you along for a week in the shop to show you what interesting and unique things I might get up to. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and keep watching to see what I come up with this week. Start off, nothing too impressive, just a wheel bearing on this B8. So I'll hammer that out quickly, and I probably won't show much of it because it's a pretty basic fix, but I will keep you updated if anything changes. So I really didn't film anything on that B8 wheel bearing job. Kind of a nightmare. I've worked on B6s that I've had an easier time getting the wheel bearing housing part out of. So I don't really feel like filming when I'm dealing with something like that, but got it done. Makes a heck of a lot less noise. Well, no noise. Before, even at like 5 or 10 kilometers an hour, it would start grinding and howling. So that's done and gone. And now, I don't think I mentioned it before, but we have a B7 in for some timing belt and some other noises that were happening in the engine. So I'll show you guys where I'm at with that now. So as you can see, I've pulled off the valve cover and also the rear cam chain housing. There was a loud noise that it didn't seem like it was isolated from back here, but I knew we had to check, obviously, the cam follower that's common on these. And based on the noise, and after I pulled that cam follower and it looked fine, based on the noise, I came back and found that this chain tensioner is easily compressible by your hand. You can basically grab it and squeeze it, which you shouldn't be able to do. Everything else looks pretty good. So right now at this stage, I have to start taking off the front end and getting it into service mode to start disassembling the timing belt area. And then I should have the parts for this tonight or tomorrow, and we'll get it finished up. Here you can see the parts that I pulled off. So the first part that you can pull off is the cam follower assembly. So the cam follower actually looks fine, but because this was lots of unknown maintenance was done on this car, we're basically going fresh. So we'll change that so he'll know at the next, every second oil change, we'll change that again. This is the vacuum pump that's attached to the back of this housing. So you have to remove this to remove that because it's very tight back there. It's super annoying to remove this. So here's an update with where I'm at. You can see the whole front end is pulled off the car. The crank pulley bolts were super tight. There doesn't seem to be any Loctite on them, but I'll give you an example of what can happen. So the head of one of them did strip out. I had to end up using a 1/2 inch air impact to get these all off. And the first one, I didn't quite hit it hard enough to start. So what'll happen is it'll round out instead of just breaking it free. So what I just did is, as you can see, I drilled out this just to the size of the actual threaded portion. So that was it's an M8 bolt. And then you can see the portion is still left in the pulley here. And thankfully, and I was hoping it was going to be this way based on how the other bolts came out, there isn't any Loctite or anything. So this just threads out by hand. And luckily, I don't have to worry about any other crazy nuts to weld on here to extract it. So now that that's out, I can continue on with the timing belt. So the B7's all buttoned up and done. Coolant's in, oil's in. The massive ticking in the back end is completely gone. When I took out the old tensioner, you could squeeze it and oil would shoot out of the shaft area instead of the relief holes that it's supposed to come through. So it was clearly the issue. Otherwise, the car's running good, smooth, quiet, other than the injectors obviously are pretty loud on these cars. One thing I did do that was pretty funny is I closed the hood and latched it before the cable was in. But a trick for that is if you reach underneath, there's a video online that shows some guy with a bent bar that he twists and turns. All you need to do is stick a pair of needle nose pliers up, and there's a spot that's pretty obvious, and you just squeeze it, and the hood pops up in 2 seconds. So if you guys ever run into that, at least you know how to do it the easy way, but it is possible. Overall, this is a pretty frustrating job. I'm not going to lie. Taking off this housing and the vacuum pump at the back is super, super frustrating. So it's not something that you can expect to do super fast if you do it yourself. Yesterday, on Monday, I delivered my Talon to the new owner, and I also picked up our S4 parts car that I'm now currently working on stripping down. As you can see, I have the car up in the air. I've stripped the entire front end off. I've taken the intercoolers off. All of the wiring harness is disconnected up top. The power steering line cooler, the AC is swung down. The rad and transmission cooler is obviously disconnected, and I just removed the exhaust. For this one, I'm going to disconnect the brakes and drop the entire subframe because I don't want to bother pulling out that heavy automatic transmission through the front. It's just not worth it for that boat anchor. It'll make it way too difficult. So as you can see, I dropped out the subframe and the whole drivetrain. There's the automatic, that's good for a boat anchor and nothing else. So we have stern engine mounts, OEM K24s, Bilstein struts on H&R springs, all new recently replaced control arms. These are soft hoses for an RS4 bipipe or the carbon fiber bipipe. There's also an integrated engineering Hemi throttle body conversion. You can see the throttle body there, and then there's an adapter plate along with the special boot. 034 bipipes. The shop that did this did what I really don't like doing. They just let the fan essentially self-clearance on the pipe itself. Whenever you install bipipes, it's my preference to take the clutch fan off and go full electric. There's also Stop Tech brakes with the rotors and fresh pads. And then underneath the car, there is, I don't know if you can see very well, but that's a ECS diff mount. And the car also has a really clean interior. It has the tip full 3-inch downpipes. It did have the 2.0 coil pack conversion, which I've already used. It did have the carbon fiber Y pipe, which I already used, and the carbon fiber air box, which is also already used. So now to get this heap off the subframe, split it up, and get this back rolling so we can push it out the back and start on the strip down and the next car. So here we are again, familiar car, familiar engine. I didn't film much. Me and Christian, he helped me out a bit and we pulled it out pretty quickly. I got the parts car obviously done and that pushed out as well. So we're kind of stocked up on 2.7s. Here's one for a B5 build in the future. We're not sure which turbos we're doing on this, so right now it'll just be maintenance. You'll probably see some of that. This is out of the parts car. You can see it's got the K04s and everything I talked about. And then we have the basically China builds, almost 500 horsepower dyno runs that you've seen. This is the engine that made that. So we are swapping on SRM K24s to see if we can truly produce 500 or more on the dyno. The one biggest difference to note with these two turbos is mostly the wastegates. The SRMs have the upgraded 1-bar gates. These are either replica or OEM K03, K04 gates, so they are basically 6 psi gates, whereas those are 14 psi gates. Otherwise, they're generally very similar. The CHRAs and exhaust housings, I'm pretty sure, are completely identical, but the difference is in the compressor side with sizing and stuff, so that'll be based off of a K24 turbo, and this is based off more close to an RS6, but upgraded wheel size, so a hybrid. So that's it for today. Tomorrow we will be pulling off the turbos, and I will be pressure washing this bay since this time I have a few more days, and yeah, with hopefully by the end of the week I'll have this all back together and we'll see how we can start maxing these out. So that'll definitely take hopefully no more than a few weeks of tuning. Hopefully we can get this done before winter hits and get on the dyno to see what we can make. Quick update on Christian's car. We got the engine bay washed. I removed his collection of asphalt that was in the subframe and in the motor mounts. So now that that's clean, I can start peeling off these Project B5 turbos and replacing them with the SRM turbos. One thing I found interesting is that, so if you recall, this is the gate that I tacked back here, and you can see when I actuate the wastegate how little stroke it has on this side. It barely moves. The gate, you can't see it in there, only opens probably about 3 to 5 millimeters. But if we take a look on the passenger side, or on the passenger side, you can see that gate moves a heck of a lot more. Right now, both of the arms are fully maxed out, so we weren't able to reach our consistent 30 psi goal that we were looking for. but we are now thinking that it might have been a diverter problem, as Christian was hearing a lot of turbo noise through the intake in higher boost levels. So we are probably bypassing or blowing open the diverter valves. So between definitely needing new wastegates on these turbos, we also may have contributed our low boost problem, or not really a low boost problem, trying to get 30 psi, but our boost issue to diverters as well. So thankfully, to solve that, the SRMs come with the 1-bar gates, and Christian just placed an order for genuine forge diverters, and we'll be putting in the red 30 psi springs. So here's an update. I have all the turbos off. You can see they're pretty similar. The inducers seem to measure the exact same size, but as you can see, these are 6 blades and these are 7 blades. So the old ones are these, of course. The new ones are these, and also, like I said before, 1-bar gates. These are stockish 6 psi gates. But otherwise, the old Project B5 ones look like they're in pretty good condition, other than the obvious issues that we have with them, which can be corrected, thankfully. But we're really excited to see what happens with the K24s, and if we can easily crack the 500 wheel horsepower mark, as well as easily modulate boost with that upgraded wastegate. One thing I noticed is the shop that last did these turbo swaps, they left in old crusty hardware on the oil drains. I always prefer to switch these because, as you can see, they're at the underside of the turbo, so any water or moisture always hangs around that area. So for the couple cents that they all are, it's just best to buy new ones of these when you do the turbo swap. I also ordered a new clip and O-ring for the coolant temp sensor. It's always nice to just replace those while the engine is out, so if they ever do fail down the road, it's easy to get them in and out, because sometimes they can get pretty crusty in there and be a real pain to remove when the engine is in the car. So now, while I wait for some of those bolts, and also a banjo was a little bit messed up from the previous install, I ordered one of those as well. I'm going to wait for those before doing the turbo swap so I can do it all at once. So an update on Dominate's car here. I'm resetting the timing because we noticed in VCDS that it was out a couple degrees, and right now I have the crank lock pin in. So as you can see, if you look here, I can't actually move that at all. There's no slop. The timing mark right there kind of lines up. This is obviously not perfect, that's why I use the pin. And you can see when I have the cam lock bar in position on the one cam, we are out quite a ways on the other cam. So what I'll have to do is loosen the 2 bolts, get the gear puller, pop them off, and then let them rotate so this locks in, and then retorque the cam bolts. So hopefully we should be able to pick up a smoother running car with maybe a little bit better vacuum once we all get this back together. So I finished up the timing, reset that. It won't be perfect because of how the belt stretches, but before we put the front clip on, when the engine is back in the bay, we'll run it and make sure it's within reason. I also swapped over to stern mounts from the stock OEM ones. I do wish there was some way to really lock this down to make it as tight as possible, but I think I've got it pretty good. So now we're going to move on to swapping the turbos. So we have the motor assembled with the new turbos. The inlets are all tightened up. We switched to the big bore 034 style inlets to help with the newer carbon fiber Y-pipe placement. We've also installed the JHM shift kit with the trio option, so it has the Delrin bushing here, as well as the weighted linkage here. And we've also already put in the shifter into the car, so that should make a big difference. We set the wastegates to crack at 15 psi, so hopefully that will help with spool up time and hitting our desired 30 plus pounds of boost. We also upgraded to Forge 008s, so we are thinking that maybe we were having issues hitting full boost because the old 710N diverters were bypassing. So these are real forges and should hold all the boost we can throw at them. We boost leak tested it as usual, didn't find any leaks, so we should be good to go. Next week we do have a snub mount coming in, but we'll install that later. But for now we're just going to get it into the car. So as you can see, had quite a bit of progress since that last clip. The motor is together, You can see we have the carbon fiber Y pipe on as opposed to our setup on the floor when we were boost leak testing everything. We also swapped to the 034 big bore upper inlet pipes, so this gives a little bit more flexibility for the Y pipe to sit in the correct spot once we get the correct hardware. We also have the nice new forges installed. Everything's buttoned up. We did take this out yesterday and dial in the boost to hit 30 pounds, so that's nice and reassuring that we saw it spike at the start, so it definitely can push over 30 pounds. And we also dialed it back as far as 25 and then fine-tuned it to hit 30. We didn't have one of our KKKL cables to do logging, so hopefully we will do that next week in next week's video. The JHM short shifter is also installed. Had a little bit of a mix-up. They sent it shipped, assembled in the incorrect manner. The notch was not on the passenger side when I took it apart and put it back together to slip through the shifter base bushing, and I wasn't really paying attention. So I had to fight with that for a bit until I realized why it wasn't going into reverse. After we flipped it around, it was pretty quick to align it, and it feels basically amazing now. I've installed a few of these into cars, just the shifter assembly, but the shifter assembly combined with the trio kit with the weight and the Delrin bushing is really, really spectacular. The shifting is totally different than with just the shifter itself. Otherwise, the car feels great. It feels like it's building boost a lot faster with those upgraded gates, but we will see with some data logs on MAF readings and then hopefully the dyno very shortly to see if we can break that 500 wheel horsepower mark and push it as far as we feel comfortable or until the motor says it doesn't want to be pushed anymore. So that's where I'm going to end off the video for this week. Next week, we'll be still working on this car a little bit, starting with the brakes and then dialing in the tune. So if you guys haven't already, make sure to subscribe, leave me a comment if you have any suggestions or questions, and I'll try to answer you guys right away. Until the next one, I'll see you guys soon.